We're going to talk about GP inventory, understanding the item screens, smart lists, and tables for GP inventory. I am Devin Southall. I am a GP consultant for 20 years now. My anniversary at ICS is in 2 weeks. It will be 20 years. I have a background in accounting and small business, and I specialize in distribution and manufacturing. So I spend a lot of time talking about inventory tables with clients. ICS reps 3 different ERPs, obviously Microsoft Dynamics GP, which we're here to talk about today, but we also do Business Central and Acumatica ERP. Blah, I can talk. All righty. So you are actually all my practice audience. We have an annual convention called Community Summit, which is in Orlando in October. People get to submit sessions that they're interested in doing, and I submitted 4 sessions. They ended up picking 3 of them, and I kind of went, huh, when I got that final reject, because no one wants to put together 4 sessions. So this is one of the sessions that I am doing Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. It's an hour-long presentation, and all of you are my guinea pigs. So you're going to notice the slides look a little different than our normal slides because it's on the PowerPoint template from the convention, obviously. All right. So that's given everyone a few minutes to come in. So session agenda. We're going to talk about item setup and common mistakes. We're not going to deep dive on to-do of all item sessions, and I'm going to turn off my screen because it looks like it's freezing. But we are going to talk about mostly common mistakes with the units of measure. We're going to talk about item site setup and the item quantities screen, what it shows you, SmartList for the same data, how it can go wrong. We are going to compare the 3 different things for item transactions. So the 3 different ways that you can look at item transactions and what they tell you different or the same. We're going to talk about the item history screen that a lot of people are not familiar about and what it stores. We're going to get into the available to promise. And then if time allows, I haven't finished the bonus slides, but I have my GP open so we can talk a little bit about lots, bins, and serials. Bonus typically is what you leave if you go really fast. And I'll be honest, I ran out of time. Okay, so objectives. What are you going to learn today? How to use the features that GP has. Learn how to fix common problems in GP, and you will become a GP inventory expert, or at least a little better than other people. Okay, grabbing in item setup cards. So we're going to dive really into troubleshooting. So not steps on how to set things up, but things that people miss, features people aren't aware of. This is sort of a who's who of all the problems that we get about item cards. So we're not actually going to talk about kits or bill of materials, but we're going to touch on all the other windows because all of them have little glitches that people miss. Okay. All right. So on our item cards, which is under inventory cards item, whether you go to the side menus or the top menus, there's a whole bunch of fields on it. All of these fields are available on the SmartList view named items, which is the SQL table IV00101 if you care. And this view actually does have the inactive, which is a newer field on it. I point that out because shockingly, a lot of the SmartLists don't have the newer fields, but thank gosh this one is. When you're creating a new item card, most of the critical fields should come down from the class ID, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But when you put on a new class ID on a new item or an existing item, there's a pop-up that says, do you want to roll down the values? And you always want to say yes. If you have manufacturing, you get it twice. If you don't say yes, you're not going to get those fields from the class. And also remember, if you're changing the class of an existing item, it's only going to change the fields it can change. So certain fields won't be changed, particularly things like valuation method or your tracking. So just be aware of that and look at what it did. Fields people miss. Short description. So this field right here is your short description. It is 15 characters long, and that's what appears on all the lookups. So if you use the lookups anywhere in GP to find it, short description. So it's very helpful to fill that field in. Next, your valuation method here, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then shipping weight, just for people doing reporting, is useful to know that the shipping weight is weird in the tables. It doesn't have decimals. So this in the tables would look at as 1,045. And my company particularly has multi-currency on. So my list price and my currency is hidden. It's up under this go-to. If you didn't have multi-currency, you would see those two fields. All right, so going to the options button, which was right down here. There's some things on the option button. So we've got our tracking field here, which is none, serial, or lot. Lot means you can have multiple things. Think die lot of yarn. Serial means only one and only one. Think the VIN number of a car, for example. You can change that for an existing item from the user interface, but you have to have no inventory and no open transactions. We've helped do it in mass, and we can get away with a little bit of that. Our category names over here, if you want to add more, those are in your inventory control setup. And in the table, these are, KEZ, it's a GP, you got to speak in abbreviations, 1 through 6. And super critical is these maintain history checkboxes. If we don't have the checkboxes checked, then system is not going to track everything correctly. So something you can check in a SmartList and you can update them. But that's again why rolling down from the class is so critical, so you can get those fields. And this is on the same view as the item card, same SmartList. All right, so let's talk about our item class setup. What are the fields that really should always come from the class and should control it? So first of all, our item type. So whether an item is sales inventory, discontinued, or one of the non-inventory, the miscellaneous flat fees or services, that should come down from our class, and we should have that set correctly for things that we don't want to keep in our perpetual, but we're going to expense those out. Our tracking, whether it's lot tracked or not, if you've got a group of things that are lot tracked, you want them in their very own class. Just, again, keeps the settings correct and ensures consistency. Whether we're using the 2 different sales tax fields and how we have those set. Allow back orders. So are you allowed to use sales order processing and create back orders for this item? Revalue inventory, obviously not relevant for our standard cost customers, but if we're having true actual costs, this has to be checked and set to 0 so that if you have a receiving or an invoice match at a different price, it changes it into the system, particularly an invoice match. The maintain history we talked about, and then the currency button helps auto assign those currencies. And I always like to say that we often have what I like to call a fees class, or sort of a junk class, that has a range of different miscellaneous fees items with different sales accounts, maybe a freight sales account or a couple services sales accounts. They're the exception to the rule. They're the one class where you're going to potentially have different GL accounts. But all the rest of the accounts should be identical to the class. Lost my mouse. There we go. All right, so item valuation method. It's particularly cryptic. It's cryptic both in the tables, which have this 1 through 5, and honestly in the GP windows. FIFO, first in, first out, perpetual is in always changing, is actual cost. Most people don't have LIFO, which is last in, first out. Average is pretty big in Europe, but we don't have a ton of clients using average here in the US. And then FIFO periodic, or as in once a while, that's our standard cost. Okay, so just good to know those. There we go. All right, I don't expect to go over this or read this. This is really included for reference. Read this over. We're going to send out the PDF of these slides for everyone. But this talks about what the accounts are used for and why I recommend leaving some of them blank. And we're going to talk about these here in a little bit. because I really want to talk about units of measure. I really like units of measure. Now, first of all, first thing to remember about units of measure is that on an item card, we specify a unit of measure schedule. So this is a base unit, whether we're supporting quantity decimals for this item, and then possibly other units for use in sale and purchasing, okay? Quantity decimals help us break up an item. And some clients think, oh, I never use it in pieces. I always use it whole. But if you're going to do assemblies or manufacturing, especially having scrap percentages, you may need to allow the system decimals so that it can do correct calculations. Even though you know in reality you're never going to use part of it. If there's some left over, you're just going to throw it away. That still needs decimals to do the math. So for me, I've heard other consultants say this differently, but I come from an operations background. So this is what makes the best sense to me and how I've always had clients set it up. The base unit should be the unit that you want to count, you want to see and report quantities on. 95% of GP's windows will be in base unit, and I'll show you the exception when we get later. And the GP stock count is in base unit. You're counting the base unit. So whatever is the thing that you want to count and see your quantities in, that should be your base units. If you need to break up this unit into smaller units, then you're going to want to use the quantity decimals. We do have a problem in GP with precision because the math only goes one way. If yard is your base unit of measure and you want to use a foot unit of measure, it's not going to go, even with 5 decimals, it's not going to be perfect, but it's kind of close enough. And again, other ERPs do the math in both directions and they don't have this issue, but unfortunately GP's older and this is what we get. Unit of measure schedule naming. So the samples in Fabricam I hate. I don't think it makes sense. So what I like to do, particularly if we have what I call a single unit, so we're going to make a unit of measure schedule that doesn't have any other units. There's just the one unit. I like the name to be the unit of measure dash the number of decimals. This means when you're picking it, you immediately know this item is going to be in capital EACH and it's going to have 0 quantity decimals. We're done. We know exactly what we're picking. The schedule field is 10 characters long. Our unit name can be 8 characters long. So with our dash and decimals, we're up to our 10. And then this is the next piece that I talk about. We need to write out our units. We need to make the units perfectly clear. And the line that I always say is, will a brand new warehouse temp that just hit your building know what to pick or ship? Because if each really means a case that has 40 individual boxes, and they ship a case as an each, that's going to be a problem, or vice versa. And so I have clients who have had these issues where the unit of measure was case, and they're shipping out something that really they wanted them to break it up. And so use your words: a 2-pack, a roll, a box, a case of 10 each. Yeah, you have to get cryptic because you only get 8 characters, a cone of 6,000 yards. But see what you can do to actually touch and feel the product, see how it's packaged, and make something that's going to be perfectly clear, again, to that brand new temp. Okay, that's going to simplify and make it so that you don't have these quantity discrepancies, because there's nothing worse than shipping out 40 of something when you really meant to just ship out 1. When you have multiple units, again, our base unit is still the unit you want to count, see, and report quantities on. Most common example I have now is people were purchasing and receiving is a different unit. The example I have over here is, this is a light manufacturing client. So they've got things that they're using, individual little things. And actually I have an example. So let me turn on my camera if I can get to it. Camera. Come on, you can do it. So here it is. They're using the individual little guys. This is how they want to inventory it, because that's how they're using it. They're using inventory BOM assemblies, manufacturing assemblies you have to use in base unit. This is sold in a package of 100. So back to my example here, case 100 is how we purchase it. There's 100 little guys, but the little eaches are how we're going to count it and use it in my inventory assemblies. If they were using full-blown manufacturing, they could use smaller, but that's what they chose to do, and that's why they wanted it. And so if you can see these other examples down here, um, our base unit of measure is EA. They were already using EA, so they wanted to stay with that. And then our unit of measures that we want for purchasing is case of 1,000 or case of 72. This makes the vendor clear on what they want to send you, and then our unit of measure schedule is each -0 / case 1,000. Again, you need to get cryptic. You can see how letters had to get dropped here, but something like that is super helpful. If you're going to start branching into alternate units of measure, you need to make sure that your receiving people understand. Um, if the PO is created in a case 1,000, so there's 3 case 1,000s, for example, receiving is also receiving 3 case 1,000s, but 3,000 is going to go into their perpetual inventory. And I have some clients that use selling units. Again, same concepts, same process. It's just in your selling units. Your pickers need to be aware of that. I don't have a lot these days. Most people have a single selling unit, and we're only using units of measure for purchasing and occasionally manufacturing. Okay. So that's my rant on unit of measures. But we're not done with them, because there are some places in GP where putting in units of measure help everyone. So first off is the purchasing options. So item purchasing options, again, cards purchasing options. This is where you can put in a default purchasing unit of measure. So even if this is the same as base, this just makes the purchaser's lives a heck of a lot easier. And so coming here and filling it out when you create a new item makes it so they can enter a purchase order without having to select a unit every single time. And if you're using POGen, this makes it a lot easier. Add to this, we want the revalue, just like we talked about down on the class. It is super important for actual cost that this revalue inventory is checked and it's set to 0. So another place where things can get mistaken if you're using your system over a long period of time. And then the quantity tolerance is a fun little feature. Generally, I have customers just pick and choose where they want it. So these two work very differently. Our shortage works for stuff like my clients who buy Gaylords full of plastic resin. They ask for 1,000 pounds, but they may get 9,900 or 9,907 pounds. There's a little shortage because, it's close enough. And that's what the vendor's going to bill them, that shortage quantity. So what the quantity shortage tolerance allows them to do is if they check this box and put that percentage in, it will actually automatically cancel that remaining PO quantity if that receipt's within the percentage. So nobody has to go back to the PO and say, no, we're not getting those 3 more pounds. The overage works a little differently. This actually stops people from receiving. And I like to put in some sort of reasonable quantity because GP as a whole will allow you to infinitely over-receive that final receipt. And really, I find it's helpful for when people type 10,000 instead of 1,000. It will stop them from posting that receipt. So most clients have an overage systematically, and then they pick and choose where they want to use the shortages. If you're using a handheld, that also has those features. But all right, so moving on to the vendor card. Nowadays, when more and more AI is reading your POs, having your vendor card helps the robots get you what you want. On your item vendor card, which is required to purchase it, you have your vendor item number. So say exactly what the vendor calls it so that you can get the right thing. And you have the vendor description. So this is not your description. And sometimes you might want to add some additional wordage on here so that you can get that 1,000-piece case and they're not sending you 1,000 of something. By default, the PO prints with both of these and then your item number as a reference also. If you have changed your PO to print something else, but by default, it prints your vendor description. And then another field that we get questions about is this originating invoice cost. So the last receipt or invoice match updates this field. I have clients occasionally ask, hey, I've already been told from the vendor what prices they're going to charge me next year. Where could I put this? So you can put that in that originating invoice cost, and it will change it for next time. So that's super helpful. And the last option to talk about here is, although we talked about the default purchasing unit of measure system-wide on that other window, if you have something like corrugated boxes maybe, and you buy them from a whole bunch of different people, they're a standard size, each vendor might send those in a different bundle. You know, somebody packs it 20 to a bundle and someone else packs it 30. This is where you can put this vendor packs it as a 30 pack. And so you can have on that unit of measure schedule the 20 pack for the one vendor and the 30 pack for the other vendor. And then here for each vendor, you have the unit of measure that that vendor ships it in. Super helpful, again, on those sort of commodity type things that you can get from any vendor. Alrighty. So similarly, we have a place where we can put a default selling unit of measure. So if you're only using that single unit of measure, or you added some for purchasing, you're going to want your base unit of measure here. This is the inventory cards price list. We're not going to get into the details of the price list, but if you want to have those default unit of measures showing up on sales orders, you're going to want to set up your screen similar to this. So we need to have our default selling unit measure up here and our default price level so that the system allows us to order these on a sales order. And in order to put it up here, you've got to put it down on the grid. So I set this up like we do for a customer who doesn't have default pricing. If you had default pricing, you would have a number down here, one method or another. But you bare minimum are going to want to have one line in the grid with your standard price level and your standard unit of measure, and then make those the defaults up here again so that when you're doing sales order entry, it pops in and your users don't have to select it. Again, SalesPad has different rules, but in GP, if you're having to select that unit of measure on every item, that's what step you've missed. All right, I'm going to take a deep breath here. Any questions on anything I have talked about yet? Feel free to throw up your react, throw something in the chat, because we're going to dive off item cards and then get into some of the other things, more off item setup. I don't see anything in the chat. I don't see any hands raised. All right, so we're going to keep going. Item quantities. So on the thing, it's quantity sites, and then this is the item inquiry that works the same way. I wanted to put these two side by side because they are super helpful. It's sort of an odd window. It has these things that we call radio buttons in GP. So when you pull it up, it sort of has the all setting. And so you're seeing the numbers for all the sites. And then if you change your radio button here, you can select a particular site, and then you see the values for the particular site. So as you go through here, it's important to remember, am I looking at the all site or a specific site? And so you notice these are very similar. The item inquiry shows all of this data over here, and then a little bit of stuff from the main item card, and then the rest from the sites. All right, so let's talk about this. And again, the SmartList that matches that has also that same little odd feature, and the table also. We've got our overall record in the system, and then we have each of our sites. So it looks duplicate if you only have a single warehouse. If you've got a bunch of warehouses, this list makes a bit more sense. It's just always good to know how the data is structured and how you're looking at things. I can't tell you how many times we get screenshots and the customer sent us for the all site. And I'm like, can we look at the specific site? All right, so let's talk about the item quantity screens. It's inventory cards, quantity sites. It is required to create it for at least your main site. You have to have a site to be able to transact, but the system sort of does this pretty invisibly. It'll pop it open and say, hey, do you want to create this? And then you just basically save it. What's useful when you have a site on here is that you can put in a primary vendor. So the primary vendor allows you to use it in PO generating, and it's super helpful for reporting. So if you want to get a list of vendor items, having a primary vendor and a primary site helps make those connections in the database. And also, we're doing more and more, which is landed cost. So landed cost here allows you to add costs, either freight or tariff, auto added into the PO and the in-transit transfer. Again, not used on standard cost. And then if you don't have multi-bin turned on, this pointer bin is super helpful as sort of baby bins. It allows you to specify where things are stocked, and you can go and look at them and report on them. The planning button, which is down here right off the screen, planning button, has fields, same SmartList fields. All of these fields are available. And notice that I changed my radio button to site, so I'm putting in planning values for my warehouse, not my default values for new warehouses. It's used by manufacturing MRP or PO generator if you're using those modules. If you're not using these modules, it is super helpful, and I have a lot of clients who just put in values. They have an order up point or something, and then they're just running the SmartList, the item quantity SmartList, to do some sort of purchase planning. Super useful, easy, particularly if you've got some other tool or you want to put some Excel calculations on it. All right, so let's talk about the quantity fields. So I'm here on the item inquiry. These fields are in that same view on SmartList, and they are kept in summary by the system. So any number that's kept in summary by the system can easily go off. How often it goes off really depends on the frequency and discrepancies by your transaction volume, your network stability, all of that stuff. So your on hand, your allocated, available is just math, the back ordered, the requisitions, the on ordered. Most of these totals are easily reset and can be put in a scheduled SQL job. I think most of our clients have a SQL job that's fixing these numbers every evening or every few hours. You also could run GP's inventory reconcile routine. I don't like the reconcile routine, and we'll touch on some of the reasons why. It's just a little too massive versus just strategically fixing the one little problem. In addition, we have what I jokingly call the Hotel California fields, which are the return, in use, the in service, and damaged. They're another type of inventory beyond on hand. They're transacted by sales order processing returns, field service RMAs, or inventory transfers. And the only way to remove them from the system is to transfer them to on hand, and then you can do an inventory adjustment or some other transaction to remove them. So this is where my joke is: you can check in, but you can never leave. Technically, you can leave. It's just a serious pain in the neck. I tend to leave the posting accounts for these blank, which if you go back and look at the account settings later, this sort of serves as a speed bump, hopefully to keep people from posting them automatically, and they can think about, why is this account missing? Oh, right, it's in the return bucket. That's the one we see most often, but we often see the damaged bucket also. And these are included in the inventory subledger. So it's super important that we don't have remaining stuff thing. It can cause hidden imbalances. The quantity sold is the last one, and it works a little differently. It is reset in the inventory year-end close, so it is just dumped down to 0, and then just starts rebuilding its numbers again when that inventory year-end close is run, if it is run at all. All right, so now we're going to dive into the 3 different item transaction inquiries in the system: the purchase receipts, the item transaction inquiry, and the item stock inquiry. We're going to talk about the difference between them and what they're based on and what they can show you from a data perspective. All right, so the first is the receipts inquiry. This is under inventory, and even though it's called purchase receipts inquiry, we're not talking technically about purchase receipts. So we've got to use receipts in its broadest sense. It is every positive transaction that adds inventory. Could be a PO receipt, it could be an inventory adjustment, it could be a sales order processing return, it could be an assembly or a BOM. Those are receipts in this most broad concept. So each positive transaction that adds inventory is going to get 1 or more records on here, and I call them the FIFO layers because they're really your costing layers in your system. This is directly looking at your costing layer table, not derived data. And so quantity on hand is your quantity received minus your quantity sold. And again, we are using sold in the broadest sense. It is used, it is taken out of inventory adjustments, transfers, all sort of recorded as quote unquote sold here. We've got some nice hot links. The receipt number hot link will take you back to that original transaction. And the quantity sold hot link is going to take you to a history table that should have all of the transactions that represent this 3. I say should have because, again, I am the support department. I see all the problems, and it's sometimes missed by posting. And in standard GP, it doesn't cause any trouble. It's fine. Inventory reconcile, in my opinion, treats this table as a little more accurate than it is. And so often inventory reconcile, if there's a problem in the quantity sold table, it's actually going to change your quantity on hand. And I kind of hate that. So that goes to why I don't like the inventory reconcile and the way it does things. Tend to avoid using the date ranges on here because for most clients with any sort of history, that'll actually freeze up GP. So I tend to never use the date ranges here, and you just scroll down to the bottom to look for what FIFO layers. And so that brings you to the next point, that non-lot tracked items, so not serial, not lot, not serial, are going to be sold exclusively from the top down, except for when you do a PO return, because a PO return is going to grab that one specific layer. And so for non-lot tracked items, you're always scrolling to the very bottom to see what are the open layers. If you're doing serial or lot, that actually trumps the first in, first out rule. Other ERPs, they call it specific costing and specific layering. GP just doesn't have that term. And the lot or serial you pick is tied to a specific FIFO or costing layer, and that's the layer. And so if you're doing this is a serial tracked item, you can see that this one's open, this one's partially sold, this one's open, this one's fully sold, even though they're in date order, because again, it has the unsold layers can be anywhere in the grid, and just something to pay attention to if you don't have a lot that are tracked. There is a SmartList for this. It is the inventory purchase receipts. It's how do I say this nicely? This is one of the SmartLists where Microsoft just threw the table data on here. So, you know, if I built this, I would have put a quantity on hand. It did the math for you. They didn't do that. So it is useful, but I don't find a lot of customers using this as it ships. This, if you're looking at it, you're looking at onesie twosies. But it is there, and it helps. There's then a matching view that you can do more calculations from. All right, moving on to the item transaction inquiry. Notice that our lookup at the top is item number, and it doesn't look inherently like sites here, but site is actually listed under document number. So if you had multiple sites down here, this has a document number, so you can put in your document number range here. You can sort it by date, and you can put a date range, and this window actually has better logic. So these do not freeze up GP for most clients, and they are usable. We also have a hot link here that allows you to take it to the original transaction. But this is off a history table. So we're not actually looking at the specific inventory, we're looking at more of the history. And so again, if we didn't have those history checkboxes on all the time, this is not going to be a comprehensive picture. It also is one of the last things done by posting. And so if there was posting interruptions, this again might not be a complete picture. Good information, but don't guarantee stack of Bibles that it's going to add up to on hand. And the same, there is a SmartList and a view for this. Useful information, just, you know, use it slightly strategically. And that does throw off the next window we're going to talk about, which is the item stock inquiry. From a support perspective, I'm the first to say I absolutely hate this window. It is a calculated and derived window. And so nothing we're looking at here is really your on-hand inventory records other than, you know, these summary quantities down here. And as we said, those can even go off. So the middle grid is reproducing that item history table, and it is calculating the balance number by taking our on hand and backing into it. The sort you can select by document date, but keep in mind that this particular table does not have a timestamp. So it's going to be, if there's multiple transactions on the same day, they're going to be reproduced here in some sort of randomish order. And so keep that in mind. And actually, Microsoft has this whole Learn article that goes through 6 different ways that this window can be off. And some of the fixes from an accounting standpoint are hairy at best. One of the fixes for a missing inventory transaction history is to remove history and then recreate the transaction from scratch with no consideration to the fact that that's just going to throw your GL off, which might have been fine. So yeah, a little concerning. Don't like some of these fixes in here. Again, so I know why customers like this window. I know why they use it. It's just, it sometimes causes more trouble than it's worth due to the varying set. So food for thought. When people call me with a problem, I'm going to go back to one of the other windows first, and then we can talk about, okay, this window's showing you bad data. Do we want to fix it or just ignore it? Next window that's useful to talk about is item history. This is a window that a lot of customers are not aware of, and it's kind of fun and has some nice purposes to it. First of all, it's not listed under inquiry, it's listed under transactions. The reason I think Microsoft put it under transactions is because you can actually put in projected quantities. Sometimes Microsoft, I think, tries to get too fancy for themselves. This is one of them, and this particular feature, if you want to use the help, it's fascinating, but I don't know why anyone would do that. So find it under inventory transactions history. Up at the top here, we have more of these summary numbers. So these are the summary numbers that are reset during that inventory year-end close. Literally, it takes the current year numbers and dumps them in the last year bucket. Bang, it's done. That's what it does. We do have scripts to reset that if you want us to help you with that at year-end. The bottom, on the other hand, is a little different. The bottom is actually a history table where it keeps track of your basically usage by period, by year, by site, both in a calendar and a fiscal period if those are different. And it's really kind of a nice little thing. The sales quantity and cost is obviously sales order processing and invoicing. The dependent quantity is used in inventory adjustments and assembly usages, but doesn't count transfers or variances, your stock counts. So there's really nice little numbers that it keeps track of, and they're pretty good. There is no SmartList or view for these, but those are the SQL tables if you want to pull off them. Just nice to know that the system's there. If somebody wants a quickie report on how active an item is, this is where to go. And keep in mind, there's, you can change your radio button to fiscal, you can change your radio button to site. You can, look at different windows on here. All right, last up is our available to promise window. So the available to promise window, I don't talk about it as much for a couple reasons. It's under inventory inquiry available to promise. There is a separate checkbox in the system registration to turn this on. So you have to go to system registration and turn on available to promise. Add to that, it is licensed with extended pack. So if you own manufacturing and field service, you have this. If you don't, you might not. What it has is it's sort of like a quickie MRP that doesn't have to be run. It just sort of has a redisplay. So we have a free forward quantity, which is right here, which is the total of all available and pending quantities in the system. And so you look through these buckets, it's pretty comprehensive. It has pending inventory receipts, pending PO receipts, released manufacturing orders. And all of these things here are actually going to be shown in detail down here in the grid. And so I included some of the details on all of that here. And then you can do this calc available date, so we can say when numbers are going to be available. Again, help is kind of useful on this window, but it's nice to have if you have it. And it doesn't depend on, so again, it's more of a future perspective. All right. Whew. 40 minutes of deep dive into inventory tables. Any questions or concerns? Got nothing. All right, so I am going to stop sharing this. Hang set end slideshow. There we go. So bonus content. Yep, there's my GP. Come on. Bear with me a second here. There we go. Okay. So inquiries for serials, lots, and bins. And this database, I do not have multi-bin turned on. So you're going to have to bear with me on bins. But this bin quantity window is a nice little window. It allows you to see quantities in bins. If you're using multi-bin, you probably want to have a multi-bin SmartList added. It's super easy for us to add you a SmartList that shows you bin quantities. And that's the IV00112 table. Your serials and lots, and again, the bin window looks a lot like this one. You have some inquiries up in the top. So lot track item is my wire item. There we go. And so we put in our item up at the top. We can specify our site or see all of our sites. And we can see all the various lot numbers. Again, remember to expand our chevrons so that we can see the quantity sold and then the quantity available on each of these. Maybe there's a lock on that or something. The drill back to lot number just shows you the lot allocations, the lot attributes. And then the serial window is very similar. So I'm going to do 100 XLG phone. And here it shows me each of my serials. Again, I can expand my chevrons to see my sites and whether they have been allocated to a transaction. And then if you're using serial or lots, you should be aware of the serial lot trace window. So this window allows you to find all transactions for a serial number. It does have a redisplay, so you have to let it think, do its little thinky thinks. And then you can select a particular serial number here in the grid if you didn't do it below and see the details. Again, double show our chevrons to see the second row. We can click into the original transaction. But if you're using serial and lots and you haven't played with the serial lot trace inquiry, you should play with that. It is a useful field. All right, that's the end of my quick bonus inquiry. So let me go back to from current slide, except it wants to do it the other way because it insists that that's my window. All right, so key takeaways. Oh, I guess I apparently haven't changed my key takeaways. Look at me. I haven't finished these slides, so we're going to stop displaying. End slideshow.